The sirens echoed through the peaceful valley like a cruel joke. I was sitting on the porch of the old cedarwood cabin I built with my own hands, its coffee steaming in my chipped mug, when the patrol SUV rolled up like it was chasing a fugitive. It wasn't the first time Karen had called the cops, but this time she'd made a mistake she'd regret for the rest of her life, sir. Got a report of a suspicious individual trespassing on HOA property, the officer said, hand resting, near his holster. Do you have any identification? I didn't answer immediately. I just stared out across the valley. Every pine tree, every rock, even the birdsong, it belonged to me. Not because I was rich, not because of some trust fund or a family inheritance, because I earned it. Every painful step, and she was about to learn that the hard way. 2 weeks earlier, I hadn't even planned to be in this part of the country. My daughter had begged me to take a break, to get away from the city, from the board meetings, from the never-ending pressure of running a multi-million-dollar land trust company. She said my eyes hadn't looked alive in months. You built that cabin when I was 10, remember? She told me, touching my hand. Go home, Dad. Go somewhere that reminds you who you are. She was right. And when I first pulled up to the gravel drive, saw the crooked mailbox I never replaced, felt the mountain air in my lungs, I remembered everything. What I didn't expect was that my land, the one I'd purchased decades ago, had become some HOA's little playground, and that someone named Karen had decided she ruled it. On the second day, she marched right up to me, her clipboard practically trembling with indignation. You can't just stay here, she snapped. This is private land. AOA restricted. Owners must file visitor clearance with the board. I chuckled. Pretty sure I don't need clearance on my own porch. She narrowed her eyes. And just who are you? Call me a neighbor, I said simply, and walked inside. That was my first mistake, being polite. Karen didn't want civility. She wanted control, and people like her, they don't stop until they've crushed you or been crushed themselves. Very next day, my water line was cut, and the trash bin disappeared. Then came the noise complaints, though I hadn't played a single note of music. It was all to provoke me, to push me out. But she had no idea who she was playing with. Because, the truth is, I wasn't just staying in that cabin. I owned every square inch of the land beneath her HOA. The board didn't know. The city registry was a mess. Records lost in a merger I helped orchestrate quietly. But the original deed, the one with the coordinates, the mineral rights, the elevation mapping, I had it in a safety deposit box with my name in bold black ink. I was the ghost landlord of this entire valley, and Karen had called the cops on the wrong man. Let me take you back 25 years. I was a soldier then. Army Corps of Engineers. After my deployment, I returned to the States, broken physically, emotionally. My unit had taken heavy losses. I'd made it back, but I'd lost 2 fingers and a part of my soul. Therapy didn't help. Noise hurt. Crowds triggered something deep. So I found this valley, a forgotten stretch of land near an abandoned trail, thick with pine, guarded by silence. I bought it with every cent I had and started building with my own hands. That cabin saved my life, but after my daughter was born, I moved closer to the city, hired a firm to watch the land, pay the taxes, keep it off the radar. I didn't want it developed. I wanted it preserved. Apparently, somewhere along the way, the neighboring developments started creeping in. And Karen, she appointed herself queen. You have until Friday to vacate, she barked again on her third visit, or the HOA will take legal action. I looked at her long and hard, then reached into my coat. She took a step back. I pulled out a folded piece of paper, weathered, stamped, notarized. Read this, I said. Then come back and tell me who needs to vacate. But she didn't read it. She crumpled it in her hand like it was trash. Forged, she hissed. We'll see what the sheriff thinks about that. So here we are, 2 deputies, flashing lights. My name being asked like I'm some drifter with no past. I sighed, stood slowly, and handed over my license. The officer scanned it, paused. You said your name was? I didn't, I said calmly. But now you know. He turned to his partner, then back at me. You're the property owner? Not just the cabin, I said. The valley? The hills? The roads you drove in on, it's all mine. That moment. That pause. It was worth every minute of restraint. Double quotes, sir. We're sorry, the deputy said quietly. We didn't know. But Karen wasn't having it. She was already storming down the trail, voice shrill and shaking. This is harassment. He's lying. He doesn't even fit the HOA profile. Look at him. And that's when I saw the crack. The mask. Slipping Karen didn't just hate that I existed. She hated that I didn't fit the narrative she built for herself. This valley was her kingdom, her power, and me. I was a reminder that no amount of rules can cage real ownership. The officer turned to her. Ma'am, I advise you to step back. He's not trespassing. She stared at me like I'd spit in her drink. I want a lawyer, she said finally. I'm calling the board. The board. They had no clue either, because over the years they'd been paying property taxes to the wrong name, one of the shell companies I owned. I kept things layered, quiet, because the land wasn't just an investment. It was a sanctuary. But now it was personal. I went inside and pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside. Photographs, me and my daughter, building the back deck. It's my late wife, before the cancer. My military discharge papers. And under all of that, maps, deeds, letters from the Forest Preservation Trust, thanking me for keeping the land undeveloped. I wasn't just the owner, I was the protector. The next morning, Karen didn't show up. But the HOA president did. Man named Greg, pale and sweating, clutching his briefcase like a lifeline. Mr. Powell? He asked timidly. I nodded. I understand there's been a misunderstanding. We'd like to discuss terms. Terms? I asked, sipping. My coffee? Well, your land is technically within the HOA perimeter, and we were unaware of your, rights. My rights? Your ownership. I leaned in. Greg, let me ask you something. Do you know what this valley meant to me before you paved over? Her hills and bulldozed her silence. He didn't answer. Tell Karen, I said. Tell her that next time she cuts my water or sends a cop to my doorstep, she won't be dealing with a trespasser. Right. She'll be dealing with an eviction notice for the whole board. And I meant every word. Because what they'd done wasn't just petty. It was a theft of peace, of history, of legacy. Now listen, you've ever been judged, pushed aside, or told you don't belong somewhere you built with your own hands? Then you know how deep that pain cuts. You know what it's like to bite your tongue and hold your breath just to keep the peace? But sometimes peace needs a storm. And trust me, we're only getting started. Stay with me till the end, 'cause this story, it's not just about revenge. It's about taking back what's yours when the world tries to erase you. It's about quiet strength, the moment you remind everyone who you really are. Stick around. You won't believe what Karen tries next. I wish I could say things calmed down after the sheriff's visit. I wish I could tell you Karen backed off when she realized who she was dealing with. But narcissists don't retreat, they regroup. It was 4 days after the deputies left my cabin that I woke up to the sound of an engine, a low hum, unfamiliar. I stepped out onto the porch, barefoot, coffee in hand, and saw a drone, hovering, watching. It wasn't one of those hobby store toys. It was professional grade, commercial, the kind a real estate agent or a surveillance contractor might use. And it was staring right at me. I didn't panic, because this wasn't a war. She was going to win with intimidation. Not against someone who'd spent years mapping terrains and building bridges under sniper fire. I went inside, opened my laptop, and tapped into my old forestry software. Within seconds, I had a live drone interference tracker running. Karen had crossed into illegal surveillance, and now I had evidence. But here's the twist. This part of the story doesn't go where you expect. Because before I could even report the drone, something else happened. Greg, the HOA president, came back. Only this time, he wasn't alone. There were 2 board members, with him an elderly couple in pastel polos and matching visors, clutching printouts and blueprints. Their expressions were sheepish, like kids caught sneaking candy. Mr. Powell, Greg said, his voice stiff. We'd like to propose a partnership. I leaned on the railing. A partnership? Yes, with your ownership established, The board agrees to recognize your cabin as a historic residence. We'd even be open to naming the surrounding hiking trail after you, the Powell Preserve.
Ow!
It should have flattered me, it didn't, because I knew what. This was a bribe, a cover-up, an attempt to avoid the storm that was building, and it was building fast. What does Karen think of this? I asked. Greg hesitated. The woman in the visor finally spoke up. She doesn't know. That told me everything I needed to know. Karen wasn't just a member of the HOA. She was the fire behind it, the chaos engine. The queen bee whose stinger ran deep, but the board. They were starting to feel the burn. I'm not interested in monuments, I said. What I want is accountability. They shifted uncomfortably. You let a woman weaponize the law, the police, and community bylaws against a man sitting on his own porch. I said slowly. You didn't check the deeds. You didn't read the land records? You just followed her. Greg's mouth opened, but I didn't give him a chance. I'm filing a land use injunction by the end of the week. The entire HOA jurisdiction lies on soil I own. And if I don't see a formal apology, if I don't get written confirmation of retraction and relinquishment of claim over my parcel lines, I stepped closer. I'll dissolve your board one lawsuit at a time. They left without another word. You'd think this was the climax, that the story would peak here, right? But no. That night, something happened that broke me in ways I didn't see coming. My daughter showed up. She hadn't planned it. She didn't even call. Just drove up the gravel road, headlights cutting through the dusk, the same way her mother used to. She parked, stepped out, and stared at the cabin like it was a ghost. Dad, she whispered. We hugged. I tried to smile, tried to act like things were fine, but she saw the tension in my shoulders. She saw the surveillance drone resting on my porch table. She saw the yellow HOA notice half crumpled on the floor. I thought you were coming here to rest, she said quietly. I was, I replied. But rest doesn't come easy when people try to erase your name from your own land. She sat beside me, hands in her lap. This isn't about the HOA anymore, is it? I looked at her, saw the same fire in her eyes I saw in mine at her. Age? No, I said. It's about legacy. She nodded, and then she told me something that changed everything. Karen's daughter goes to my university. I blinked. What? She's on campus. Environmental science major. I recognized. The last name on a club flyer? Same face, just younger. I didn't know it meant anything until now. The irony hit me like a freight train. While Karen was bulldozing peace and polluting the valley with her power games, her daughter was out there trying to protect the earth, learning to preserve nature, studying the very thing her mother was destroying. But the worst part? She'd mentioned Karen once. She said her mom used to hike these hills before the HOA paved everything. Said she lost her dad out here in a fire when she was 10. Never got over it. Suddenly, it made sense. The paranoia, the control, the rage. Karen wasn't just trying to dominate this land. She was trying to hold on to a ghost. I didn't forgive her, but I understood her, and sometimes that's more powerful than anger. The next morning, I drove down to the HOA office, not to fight, to talk. Karen was there, behind the front desk, glasses perched on her nose, red lipstick trembling. You, she said coldly. I'm not here to argue, I said. I came to listen. She stared. At me for a long time? You're trying to humiliate me. No, I said. You've already done that to yourself. That hit her. But I kept going. Your daughter, she's studying conservation. She still believes in green hills and clear trails. And once you did too. Before all this concrete, before the fences, before the cameras. Her lips parted, but no sound came. I'm not your enemy, Karen. But I won't let you rewrite the rules on land that was here before either of us were born. She finally looked down. For the first time since we met, she looked small. I didn't know, she whispered. They told me it was abandoned, that no one had owned it in years. I pulled out a photo from my pocket, me and my daughter. Standing in front of the cabin, Mud on our boots, paintbrushes in hand. Not abandoned, I said. Just sacred. She didn't cry. But her hands trembled, and then she did something I'll never forget. She stood up, reached into a drawer, and handed me the HOA master plan, the blueprint, the zoning codes, the pipeline installation forecast. You don't need to file anything, she said. We'll remove the fencing, we'll redact the claims, just don't take it all away, please. It wasn't a victory, it was a truce, and sometimes those matter more. But just when I thought it was over, I got a letter, not from Karen, from the county zoning office, apparently.
Ow.
An application had been filed quietly, secretly to turn part of the valley into a luxury resort. Not by the HOA, but by a developer from out of state. A name I didn't recognize, but I knew the smell of corporate greed when I saw it. They'd bought some parcels on the edge of the valley. Were planning roads, construction, a helipad they didn't care about. Ownership, they cared about erasure. And I realized this wasn't over. It was only beginning that night. I sat by the fire with my daughter. We talked about her mother, about the nights we spent building this cabin, about the way the stars looked brighter here than anywhere else. Then I told her something I'd been holding in for years. If something happens to me, I said softly, this land is yours. All of it, but don't let anyone touch it. Not for money, not for power. She didn't say anything, just nodded, and I knew she understood. Friends, if you've ever stood in a place that healed you, if you've ever fought for something quiet and sacred in a world that wants noise and profit, then you know the storm we're walking into, because this isn't just about an HOA. It's about legacy, it's about memory, and it's about standing between greed and the green. So please don't look away now, because the next chapter, it's the most important one yet. Stay with me, watch till the end, because what happens next changes everything. They say you don't know what you're fighting for until someone tries to take it from you. And the moment I opened that county zoning letter, everything changed. A resort on my valley. It wasn't just disrespect. It was a direct attack. I had always believed the cabin and the land would be passed down quietly, held in trust, left to breathe and grow. But now the permits had names. Names I didn't recognize. Names from out-of-state firms with cold emails and quiet buyouts. And the kicker? Someone inside the HOA had sold those edge parcels without disclosing it to the rest of the board. That's when I realized Karen wasn't my biggest problem anymore. She was the match, but someone else was building the fire. I stared out at the tree line, my chest tight. These weren't just hills. They were memories. My wife's laughter echoing through them as she sketched the sunrise. My daughter running through them in rain boots 3 sizes too big. My own hands blistered from chopping wood, but alive, more alive than I'd ever felt in war or boardrooms. They wanted to put a spa here. My daughter saw the letter too. She stood behind me silently, arms folded, then finally spoke. We do? It wasn't a question, it was a promise, a declaration, so we got to work. And here's where the story takes a turn. Because the next few days weren't about confrontation, they were about documentation. I drove into town to the county archives, the same building where I'd filed the original deed, where the clerk with the shaky hands had stamped my name and said, "You sure about this much land, son?" Was, and I still am. The clerk on duty was new, fresh-faced, distracted, probably. Didn't know what a land trust even was, let alone how it worked. But once I explained and showed him the stamped copies, he nodded slowly. We've had interest in that region lately, he said. Developers from Phoenix and Colorado. Someone's trying to consolidate rural spaces. Who? I asked. He typed something into his screen, hesitated. Not supposed to say. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the Forest Service badge I hadn't used in years. Not law enforcement, but still respected in rural circles. His eyes flicked to it, and he leaned closer. Granville Pacific, he whispered. They've been quietly buying valley-adjacent land through dummy cores. Some HOA members in nearby towns are helping. I think they're investing in golf courses and Airbnb trails. But the contracts? He didn't finish. He didn't have. 2. This wasn't just about my valley. It was a blueprint for destruction. I drove back to the cabin, my tires kicking up dust like smoke signals. My daughter met me on the porch. Karen was there too, but she wasn't yelling. She was sitting on the step, alone, quiet. When she saw me, she stood. I didn't know. I didn't say anything. Just looked at her. I knew someone had sold a few. "Parcels? I thought it was you," she said. "After the fight, I figured you were cashing out. I'd burn this place down before I sold it to people like them," I snapped. She flinched. Then, she pulled something from her purse. Photo. Cracked and faded. It was her as a child, standing in front of my cabin. "I wasn't lying when I said my dad died here," she said. "There was a fire. A storm hit the power lines. He didn't make it out in time." My throat tightened. I came back because this place was all I had of him. When they built the HOA, I saw it as a chance to protect it. But somewhere along the way, she didn't finish. She didn't have to. "I fought the wrong person," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." We sat on the porch together for the first time. Not as enemies, not as rivals, but as survivors of grief. "Of loss. I want to help," she said. "So we formed an unlikely alliance, Karen, once the tyrant of bylaws, now became the leak in the HOA's fortress. She gave me everything. Meeting minutes, secret recordings, messages from board members discussing, donor bonuses from Granville Pacific. It was worse than I thought. These weren't misguided homeowners. They were accomplices. The board had voted in secret to ignore land boundaries, to pretend the parcels belonged to the HOA, just to facilitate the sale. And once the resort broke ground, they'd all walk away richer. But here's the part that knocked the breath out of me. Granville didn't just want the appease of the valley. They had filed for eminent domain against me. They were claiming that my land was underused. It could be repurposed for community benefit. I'd heard of this happening in cities. Never here, never to me. I sat in the cabin that night, fire flickering, walls creaking, like they remembered every storm we'd ever survived. My daughter was asleep upstairs. Karen had gone home, and I realized something terrifying. Money doesn't fear memory. Developers don't fear love. They fear proof. And so, I got to work old war friends, environmental lawyers, professor I once helped fund from the state college. We gathered maps, ecological surveys, historic designation paperwork. I even found the original forestry preservation grant from the 90s that marked this land as critical migration habitat. And then it went public. Social media, local news. A press release titled, "They called the cops on the cabin owner." Turns out, he owns the whole valley. It spread like wildfire. And the next morning, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. Karen invited me to attend. I walked in wearing my father's old work jacket, not a suit. Mud on my boots, sawdust in my hair. I didn't need a PowerPoint. I was the point. "You lied," I said calmly, "to your members, to the county. And now, everyone knows." The room was silent. Greg, the same man who tried to offer me a plaque and a handshake just a week earlier, stood up. "This is extortion," he said. "This land is in flux. Just because you own parts of it doesn't mean I..." Held up the original deed, stamped, certified, dated 1999. He sat back down. I turned to the members. "You wanted a mountain view? Got it. You wanted quiet mornings? You got it. But now, you're ready to bulldoze the soul of this valley for a wine bar and a tennis court?" No one responded, so I made my final move. "I'm giving you 2 days. Rescind the Granville partnership, disband the board, and transfer administrative oversight of this region to the State Land Trust, or I'll file a cease and desist that shuts down this entire neighborhood." Greg stood again, pale and shaking. "You can't." "I can," I said, "and I will." Walked out before they could respond. Outside, Karen was waiting. "Did they agree?" "They will," I said. "They don't have a choice." That night, we didn't celebrate. We just sat by the fire, Karen on one chair, my daughter on the other, and watched the stars blink above us like they'd seen it all before. But there was still one thing I hadn't done. The next morning, I drove to the last parcel on the valley's edge. A construction flag had already been placed in the ground. I pulled it out, dropped it in the dirt, and took a long, slow breath, because I knew what I had to do next. The storm wasn't over, but I had the high ground, and now I was going to protect it no matter what, if you're still with me. Thank you. This story isn't just about land or laws or HOA. It's drama. It's about something bigger, something worth fighting for. And in the final chapter, you'll see exactly what that fight costs, and what it saves. Stay with me till the end. The truth deserves to be told. The morning the bulldozers came, I was already standing at the edge of the ridge, coffee in hand, boots planted in damp soil, a pair of binoculars hanging from my neck like an old friend. The machines didn't rumble onto my land. They stopped, just short. A man in a navy blue suit stepped out of a glossy black SUV behind them. No dust on his shoes. No soul in his eyes. He wasn't HOA. He was corporate. Granville. Pacific had finally sent their wolf in a tie. "You must be Mr. Powell," he said with a smile, too polished to be real. I didn't offer my name, didn't extend my hand. He walked up anyway, clipboard in hand, thick file tucked under his arm. "We believe there's been some confusion about the zoning of this area. I represent Granville Pacific Holdings. We've legally acquired perimeter parcels through multiple shell entities, all approved by county record." He said it like I was supposed to be impressed. I just nodded slowly, then reached into my coat and pulled out a brown envelope. Quietly, without drama. I handed it to him. He opened it. He didn't smile again. Inside was a certified court order, an emergency injunction from a state judge. Delivered just 12 hours earlier, filed by my attorney, backed by public outrage, supported by historical land trust documentation and a reactivated preservation status from the Department of Environmental Resources. Granville Pacific could build all they wanted, just not here, not now, not ever. His face twisted slightly. Not anger, embarrassment, because no one likes being told no by someone they thought was weak. "This will delay our schedule," he muttered. "No," I said. "This ends it." He stared at me for a beat too long, then turned on his heel. Walked back to the SUV, drove off without another word. The machines left behind him like scolded dogs. And for the first time in weeks, silence returned to the valley. But the story didn't end there, because sometimes winning still leaves scars. Let me take you back, not to war, not to my daughter's birth, not even to when I built this cabin with my hands blistered and bloodied, but to one quiet spring morning, years ago. My wife and I had just finished the back deck. She was barefoot, balancing a cup of tea on her knee, hair tangled from sleep. She looked out across the hills and whispered, "Promise me they won't turn this place into parking lots and brochures." I took her hand. "I swear." I never thought that promise would become a battle. That one day I'd be standing alone, years after her death, facing developers, drone surveillance, and HOA power plays. But that's the thing about promises. The real ones never die, even if the people who made them do, back in the cabin. My daughter had printed out every hateful comment the HOA had made online. Emails, threats, rumors. She'd highlighted names, connected timelines. She had become my right hand. But when it was over, she looked tired. "Can we breathe now?" she asked. I didn't answer right away, because I knew what came next. Legacy doesn't rest. It rebuilds. Karen stopped by that night. Not in war paint, not with bylaws, but with her daughter, the one studying conservation. She looked so much like her mother had in that photo. Full of fire, but unsure where to aim it. They didn't come to apologize, they came to listen. We sat around the fire pit, 4 of us, me and my daughter, Karen, and her daughter, sharing stories, memories, and finally, intentions. "I want to protect this place," Karen's daughter said. "Not just visit it. I want to study the soil, the trees, the history." My daughter smiled. "Then you'll need access, and maybe training." So we started something, not a company, not a foundation, a promise. Reborn, we named it the Valley Hands Project, a mentorship and preservation program for young conservationists, local or otherwise, to learn about land stewardship directly on the soil they hope to defend. We held the first gathering under a massive oak near the North Ridge, 20 young people with notebooks and hiking boots, standing where the resort signs used to be, staked into the ground, and I realized this valley wasn't just mine anymore. It was becoming theirs, and that's the legacy worth fighting for. But before I close this chapter, there's one more thing you need to know. Greg, the HOA president, filed an appeal. He didn't go quietly, in fact. He tried to sue me for emotional damages caused by what he claimed was public humiliation from my press release and viral posts. We met in court. He brought 4 attorneys and a slideshow. I brought a stack of papers and the land deed. The judge looked bored until Greg accused me of posing as a veteran for sympathy. That's when I reached into my bag and pulled out a box inside. My Army medals, discharge papers, and a folded flag from my wife's funeral presented to me by the same government that Greg claimed I was faking service for. The courtroom went silent. The judge dismissed the case on the spot and fined Greg's legal team for wasting public resources. Karen didn't show up to defend him. She was at the ridge with her daughter, planting seedlings where the diggers had nearly carved roads. Funny how fast people change when they lose power, and how much faster they crumble when they try to abuse it. It's been for months since that day. The trees are thicker now. The deer have returned to the lower trails. A new wooden sign hangs at the entrance to the gravel path. Powell Valley protected forever. Visitors come. Not many. Just enough. They walk the trails, breathe the air, and leave lighter then. They arrived. Sometimes they recognize me, sometimes they don't. I don't mind either way because I didn't do this to be seen. I did it so the world could still see places like this. If you've watched this far, you already know. This story isn't about an HOA. I tease about not letting anyone tell you what you're worth. It's about remembering where you came from, protecting it from those who only see dollar signs where we see roots. You don't need $1 million to own power. You don't need your permission to stand your ground. You just need to remember who you are. To anyone out there who's been pushed, cornered, lied to, this is your sign to stop apologizing for taking up space. Stand on your porch, hold your ground, and when the world tries to rewrite your story, hand them the original. Because the truth, it always wins eventually. So share this with someone who needs to hear it. Let them know that one man, one promise, and one valley made the world. Pause, not with bullets, not with money, but with memory. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I'll see you on the ridge.